So I want to talk about Haney's The Forge. Seamus Haney was his name. And as you've noticed, as we've moved away from the older sonnets, um, once we get outside a certain time period, sonnets are just used in any number of creative ways. And in this particular case, we cannot even designate this as an Italian English or Spenserian sonnet. Because you'll notice, if you look at your notes from your scavenger hunt, that the rhyme scheme doesn't fit with any of them. And so for that reason, what I'd like to tell you is this is just a modern sonnet. It doesn't fit into one of the categories. So I thought I'd walk through it with you. I am going to start with the cultural context behind this one because it does help us in a few places. Seamus Haney grew up in rural Ireland, and he grew up there in the 1900s, yes, the 20th century, 1900s. And he would walk by a blacksmith's shop on his way to school every day. And so this is written about an actual blacksmith. I did link an article online if you want to take a look at this actual blacksmith, you may. But it is written about an actual blacksmith because Seamus Haney, as a kid, found this place to be fascinating. And so on one level, the poem is just talking about smithies. And it is talking about it's talking about blacksmithing at a time when it was being phased out. And so when we get to, there's a certain line in the poem where you're like, how could he recall horses and yet there's traffic now? It's because it was this poem is set on the cusp of the modern era, or not on the cusp of the modern era, I apologize. It's in the modern era where in rural Ireland there were still a lot of animals that needed shoes, of course, but there's more and more traffic. And so this part of the trouble going on here in this poem is the blacksmith is sort of watching his trade go by the wayside because of modernity. So that's modernity, if you didn't catch that word, modernity. And so let's read through it. All I know is a door into the dark. That's a great opening line, and probably that's the line that caught me and snagged me to get me intrigued about this poem. All I know is a door into the dark. And literally, he's talking about passing the blacksmith shop and seeing the door, and there's just darkness from the outside. But obviously, this resonates much more deeply, and we'll come back to that. Outside, old axles and iron hoops rusting. Inside, the hammered anvil's short-pitched ring. And so we have two lines of juxtaposition. Here's what's going on outside, and here's what's happening inside. These things outside, probably because modern times are coming, these things are no longer quite as needed, and so they're rusting. But inside, there's still work being done because his job isn't quite phased out entirely. Inside the hammered anvil's short-pitched ring, the unpredictable fantail of sparks. So that's a great image of what happens when you strike molten metal, with a hammer. The unpredictable fantail of sparks or hiss when a new shoe toughens in water. And so once you have that molten metal in the shape you want it, you stick it in the water to solidify it. Period. The anvil must be somewhere in the center, horned as a unicorn, at one end and square, set there immovable, an altar where he expends himself in shape and music. And so what I would like to point out here is we're looking at a narrator, but this is an actual blacksmith he's referring to. We don't know who the I is. I mean, presumably, we would say it's Seamus Haney. Thank you, Belle. We'd say it's Seamus Haney, but again, if the poem resonates outward, right? But whoever this narrator is talking about the actual blacksmith. And there's some beautiful things going on in here. The anvil is horned as a unicorn. It's such an interesting comparison because, simile that is, because unicorns we think of as delicate and white and just a little bit more graceful, if you will. But if you've ever seen an anvil, it's hunky and squat and what it says at one end and square, right? But it has a horn at the end of it, right? So it's just an interesting comparison because we could say that's even a conceit, if you like. But then we get into this too. He calls it an altar where the blacksmith expends himself in shape. And if he stopped there, it probably wouldn't be as dignified, but he expends himself in shape and music, as though what the blacksmith is doing is leaving some sort of sacrifice at the altar, or rather his work is a type of religious worship, if you will. And he doesn't overplay it. He doesn't add too much religious diction. He doesn't get super highfalutin about it, but he's just suggesting that there is some sort of beauty in this very manual type of labor. And that was one of Seamus Heaney's characteristics of his poetry. You read two poems at the beginning of the year, one about a turf cutter and one about a potato digger, someone digging for potatoes. And what he was known for is taking blue-collar work or physical labor, if you will, and dignifying it. That he recognized that all jobs were important, not just white-collar ones. And a lot of what he is dealing with as he grows up is he has this poetic inclination, but he comes from a long line of farmers. And so trying to reconcile, well, am I a farm laborer with my hands dirty, or am I a poet? But in moving into being a poet, he never ever forgets his roots or denigrates them. There's something noble and beautiful in the work of his father and grandfather that he pulls out into his poetry. And so this is another example where, this particular poem is another example where he is dignifying difficult, gritty work that sometimes gets overlooked. So we'll continue. Sometimes leather aproned, hairs in his nose, and that has no resonance outward beyond just a very descriptive detail, so that's kind of funny. He leans out on the door jam, recalls a clatter of hoofs where traffic is flashing in rows. And so this is why it's helpful to know that this poem sort of is set in the 1960s, which to us, you think, gosh, 1960, that's fairly modern. There's still blacksmiths. But in rural Ireland, yes, there would have been blacksmiths still. But you'll see, this is someone who's transitioning, who knows that life is transitioning from this more antiquated time with the need for animals to, no, we have cars now, right? He recalls the clatter of hoofs where traffic's flashing in rows, then grunts and goes in with a slam and a flick, probably of a cigarette, to beat real iron out, to work the bellows. So even though he can see that, the modern times are coming and that he potentially won't be phased out of needing to work as much, there is still work for him left to do. So again, on one level, this is just talking about a blacksmith. But on another, this poem sort of also represents what a poet does as well. So all I know is a door into the dark, and if now we shift this to look at the narrator, and the narrator implying that he understands what this man does physically is what he is doing mentally. So what is the poet doing? He's trying to go illuminate the darkness. He's trying to create something out of the dark and present it to the world. So obviously not all of the poem's going to line up as well, right? But when he talks about how the blacksmith has to work very hard at pulling something out of the metal, that would be likened to a poet who's sitting down trying to figure out what to write, that he's, potentially, if you want to say this, he's beating some sort of meaning out of his writer's block, right? But I think it really resonates more down here when we talk about his altar isn't going to be an actual physical anvil, but there is this idea that the poet is also expending himself in shape and music. Music resonates there very much so with poetic rhythm and whatnot, but there's an idea here that it's not just the blacksmith that's trying to form something that takes a lot of hard work, but also the poet whose work might be mental, but still nonetheless has some sort of beauty to it. And so in that way, he kind of combines, he sees the beauty of physical labor, sorry about the bell, he sees the beauty of the physical labor, and yet at the same time, we can see how he's also very, very subtly implying that the poet has the same kind of difficult work just from a mental standpoint. So I want to be careful. I don't think the poem is an overarching metaphor. We're not going to say the axles represent the poet's pen and the anvil represents the paper. I don't think you can do that with it. But we're going to say that the opening with the eye gives rise to this idea that there's more going on here than just the blacksmith. So I hope that's been helpful for understanding that. I think this is a lovely poem.